On this episode, we meet a bicycle advocate in Ottawa, and we talk with an urban planner about walkable neighborhoods. Finally, we meet another bicycle advocate in Sacramento. Stay tuned. We're in Ottawa talking with Brett Delmage. How long have you been involved in bicycle advocacy in Ottawa?
Almost 20 years. I didn't think I'd make it this long, but been pushing bicycles 19 years now, I think, since 1988.
And over those years, what good things have happened for bicyclists in the city?
I think one of the key things we've had over the last 15 years is cyclist education, improving the quality of cyclists and not just the quality of roads. It's so important that people operate bicycles like vehicles and know the fundamentals to do so safely, whether you're a kid or a police officer who's a role model for other people on bikes. It opens up your opportunities to ride a bike when you feel confident riding on any particular street and you don't feel intimidated just because there isn't a bike lane or an off-road path. Every street then serves to get you to your destination. So we've had historically strong support for cycling training and education motorists in this city. Unfortunately, like so many things related to cycling in Ottawa, the support has really been dropping in the last 5 years across the board, and I'd say we're rolling backwards now.
What are some of the signs that bicyclists aren't getting the support that they did just a few years ago?
This year, after almost 20 years, the cycling education program support was cut by the city, even though it was only $30,000. We used to spend maybe $2 million a year on improving infrastructure for cycling. Now it's down to I bet $40,000 this year, if that. We used to have people working in different cities on cycling, and now there's really only one person left in the whole city of 800,000 people. Attitudinally, it doesn't seem to be getting support anymore, whether it's trying to get parking at a city facility or just roads, paved. The roads are deteriorating quite badly, and I think we'll have to start suing the city when people get hurt because they don't fill the cracks. It's been quite disappointing. The whole world seems to be responding to climate change and the need to get people on more efficient transportation, cycling, walking, human-powered active transportation. Yet Ottawa seems to be ignoring it more each year.
If you had the city's dedication to bicycles, you had the resources there that you had a number of years ago, what would be the top priorities for them to work on?
I think we need to get back on the cycling training and people start cycling. We need to reach the youth because those are always our future cyclists. I think already, and I don't know so much about other North American cities, but we almost saw this coming in the 90s, maybe starting in the 80s, the suburbanite and the decline of cycling in suburban neighborhoods. And it's almost like we've lost a generation of cyclists here. The city needs to constantly promote that and act within its whole system, like cycling is important, so that it's not oddball, that it's safe, convenient, cheap, certainly with increasing gas prices now that consistently over $1 a liter. It's hit that mental kind of point, but people still need some encouragement, some information on how they can ride, where the routes are, good maps, showing how they can get there. And information on how to operate their bicycle, how to pack their goods or their groceries so they can hop on and do even a neighborhood trip if it's not 20 kilometers across the city. Not everyone's going to do that, but many of our local trips can be done on bicycle. And of course, generally a lot of traffic in neighborhoods is local traffic. People in their own cars going a few blocks to the grocery store or whatever, and those could be displaced by bicycles. We also need, infrastructure when it's built lasts a long time, or we're stuck with it a long time, so we need to have a long-term view when we design buildings that there's space for bicycles to park in them. They're going to be here, 40 years maybe before they're torn down. And if you don't build space in for parking now, you're going to be struggling with that for a long time. Also, when you give away land that might be needed for a connecting route to link two neighborhoods, you create barriers for easy human transport, and then people have to go all the way around on the more unpleasant and probably less safe arterials instead of a very short trip in between the neighborhoods. So we need to watch that. Kind of in relation to that as well, land use planning. Cyclists, at least in Ottawa, have understood how important that is, and our development patterns. Making sure that we have integrated land use where jobs aren't all located 20 kilometers away from where people are living. And neighborhood schools is a problem with that as well. We're closing our neighborhood schools because there isn't the enrollment at the moment, and we're not acknowledging that neighborhoods turn over. And there'll be, new younger families moving in at some point in the future. Then what? We have to bus all the kids 10 kilometers to a mega school instead of giving them the healthy opportunity in the future to cycle and walk to a neighborhood school. So once you, in an established neighborhood, lose your school property and sell it off for, who knows, condos or something, you can't get that land back. It's a developed neighborhood, and where are you ever going to put a school and a playground up again?
We're in Sacramento, California, talking with Eric Fredericks. What does it take to make a walkable community?
Well, I think it takes a few things. Number one, I think density is very important, and definitely a range of housing and affordable and different types of housing. You can have single-family uses or high-density residential. And another important factor is short block sizes, so people can walk without having to walk too far. And along with that, a number of intersections. The more intersections you have, the more chances you have to put different types of uses at those intersections. And also as important is a mix of uses, such as shopping and retail, grocery stores, churches, bars, restaurants, different activity centers that people can walk to. I think that's very important to create a lifestyle that's active and generates more pedestrians and bicycles out and about on the street. So a lot of people talk about walkable neighborhoods in more suburban or rural type of settings, and they seem to talk about having a sidewalk and having a pleasant walk. And I think there's a distinction when I talk about walkable neighborhoods, that it's not just about having a pleasant walk, it's having destinations and places you walk to, so you don't have to use a car to drive to, say, the grocery store or schools or libraries, places that personally I can walk to in a walkable neighborhood.
And you started out with the D word, density.
Mm-hmm.
Why is density important? Why couldn't we just have everything, all the same stuff, but spread out more?
Well, when you're spread out, it's definitely tougher to walk to places. In areas where you have 1 acre or 2 acre parcels, you have a long distance sometimes between houses, and what happens in that model is that typically a big box type of retailer comes in, like a Walmart or a Target, because you have a greater distance spread out, and therefore people can't walk to these destinations, so they have to drive. And because you're using up so much more land, you actually have to drive to those shopping centers because you can't walk, or biking is not an option because it's too far to bike and you can't carry all your goods with you. So I think density is important to give a different range of uses within a short area, within a short walk shed, if you will, that you can get to the bank or your grocery store without having to walk a mile. And definitely density helps. And some people are afraid of density, but I think when it comes down to it, there's different density options that people can feel more comfortable in. Not every walkable neighborhood has to have large towers of, thousands of people living in them. You can have 2 or 3 story buildings close together, and on the corner have a corner market, and I think those are definite options of density.
Okay, so we aren't necessarily talking about Manhattan when we talk density.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, you modern zoning frequently separates uses, so your housing is all one place, your shopping's all somewhere else, your offices are all somewhere else, very carefully isolated from each other. What does that do to walkability?
Well, it's a definite detriment to walkability. When you segregate uses, you basically say that this particular area, this particular zone is going to be used for this type of activity. So what it creates is little islands of places that don't really work for walking or biking. Say in a more suburban type setting, you just have a residential zone. Well, the only thing you might be able to walk to are other houses, and typically in those type of situations, you have developments that don't connect to each other. You have sound walls or no sidewalk connections or no street connections, so it becomes very unhospitable to walking. You might have a school or a park mixed in, which is definitely nice, but only a small number of people can actually walk to those destinations a lot of the time. And then if you have a commercial zone, typically when you segregate residential from commercial, you essentially get larger strip malls because people aren't able to walk to the commercial developments, so they have to drive, and therefore you have to have a lot of parking to accommodate those people. So it creates this environment that's not very friendly to walking or biking, that it creates that suburban model that we so often see, that there are these huge parking lots, and the only days that they're really full are Christmas shopping, if then. So we don't have a very desirable place. There's no what you call a sense of place that draws people in, that makes them want to walk because they don't feel comfortable there. And the same thing when you segregate uses and people aren't walking, then people don't put in or communities don't necessarily put in sidewalks or force developers to put in sidewalks. And so everything tends to be segregated from everything else, and so it becomes very difficult to provide an environment where you don't have to use an automobile.
And going back, trying to retrofit places, adding sidewalks might be the easiest part of it. Then, if you have land use policies that are frozen into zoning and deeds and so on, where do you start if you're trying to take a 1970s suburban model and make it into someplace that's really walkable beyond just a nice path in the park?
Well, I think it's definitely tough, but actually I've seen quite a few communities doing exactly that. I think a good example is in nearby San Jose, California, where they took an old strip shopping center and tore it down, and they turned it into a more walking type of village that you'd see in Europe, like where you have very well designed buildings with retail on the bottom and then housing up above that. And the walking environment is very pleasant. You have different shops and like a Borders, there's a Best Buy. So you have your typical suburban type places, but then again you have cafes and movie theaters and housing up above. So it creates this very lively little neighborhood in the middle of suburbia. And there are places around the country that are doing exactly that. And what they're doing is going in and taking some of the parking and reorienting the layout of these old parcels that have all these parking lots and bringing the buildings up on the street, or bringing the buildings closer together and developing more closely, and either getting rid of some of the existing parking or putting in parking structures that condense the parking a little better, so you have more areas to walk and bike and have more room for shopping and residential. And I think that's an important trend that's going on. As far as land use policies and zoning, a lot of times you basically have to kind of start from scratch again and really work to make sure that you can get different zoning codes and policies that create an environment that you would really desire, rather than segregating these uses that you want to have different types of land uses and zoning that feel more like a small town or a larger city that allows you to walk to different places. And that's difficult. There's a few types of different code structures going around the country right now. Smart codes where you aren't necessarily dictating what type of land uses are going to go in a particular area, like residential or commercial, and having that typical segregation. It's more defining the form of buildings rather than necessarily the function. And so there's different types of models that suburban communities and 1970s communities are doing to change that model around the country.
We're in Sacramento talking with Tom Shefflin. How can the bicycling be combined with transit use?
Bicycling can be combined with buses and light rail here in town because the buses have bicycle racks and the light rail allows bicycles on the train. Long ago, when I lived in Sunnyvale for a short time, the trains did not allow bicycles, and I walked a mile to the train station on both legs of the train ride, which was okay, but it took a long time. If I had been able to bicycle that same mile on each leg, I could have bicycled maybe 3 to 5 minutes instead of a 20-minute walk, and times 2. So the time would have been much less spent on walking to get to and from work. So I might have been much happier, more willing to take the train at that time. But in addition, when you bicycle to the bus stop or the light rail station, you can bicycle anywhere from a block to, say, 3 or 4 miles in very short time. So if the bus doesn't go exactly where you need it to go, which is frequently the case, you can make up that distance with a bicycle ride. And frequently, if you bicycle to and take the bus in the early morning to work, you're bicycling in perhaps nice weather, at least during the spring and summer months in most parts of the country. Here I can bicycle all year round.
And getting people to bike more, either combined with transit or for the whole journey, what sort of impact can that have on air quality, which I'm sure is a concern here in California?
It would have a huge impact on air quality. But as cars get cleaner and cleaner, that impact will go down. However, safety, noise, congestion, quality of life, those are the factors that will begin to rise in prominence as more and more people are driving, particularly in California. We expect 50 million people to live in California in the near future, and we simply can't build enough roads. There is a thing, and it's been validated, that if you build a road, the cars will come. People will tend to drive more because they can. So building more roads is not the answer. We have to find something, an alternative to driving. For some lucky people, that could be telecommuting. But for the people that need to work, rather to drive to work, to get to work, bicycling, either just bicycling or bicycling in conjunction with some other form of public transportation, including your own vehicle, can be a win-win proposition. A friend of mine would bicycle to this very park we're at, this person would drive about 10 miles to the very park we're at, and then bicycle in another 20 miles to work, both to get the exercise because that person really liked to bike, but also because that person would drive on the difficult and the dangerous portion of her commute and bicycle on this beautiful pedestrian bicycle-only trail.
And with your family, what have you been able to do, or are you going to be able to do, to get your own children to bike or walk more?
Well, thank you for asking that. I have two boys, 18 and 4. The 18-year-old would bicycle with me in the mornings from kindergarten till 6th grade, but only on those mornings that I was able to stay late enough at home to do that. And then I would bicycle both bicycles home, because my wife would typically pick up our son in the afternoons, and it wasn't practical to put the bike in the car on the way home, and it wasn't practical to have a bike rack. So for elementary school, we had it covered pretty well. But junior high, we homeschooled our son, and in high school, the high school was 12 miles away. So although we did bicycle both ways, once on a tandem and once on our own bikes, it really wasn't a practical day-to-day sustainable method of getting our son to school. When my son was a junior, he asked to arrive at school 30 minutes early so he could earn money in the cafeteria. I said, sure, but I don't drive to work, and so I'm not going to drive you to school. Instead, I'll drive most of the way, and we can bicycle the last 3 miles on this very trail we're next to, rain or shine, year-round. And he did it because his motivation was earning the money, and my motivation was getting him to exercise on a bike. Now I have a 4-year-old who hasn't started school yet, but next year when he does, he and I will become a walking school bus of 2, hopefully joined by many other parents and students in our nearby elementary school. Even though we have a good bicycle lane and some dedicated pedestrian bicycle-only trails, relatively few students at this school bicycle or walk to school. A number of parents drive. And I feel as a parent that both the safety of my child is paramount, rather, I feel the safety of my child is paramount. So he or she has to have a safe route to school, both from the cars as well as from anything else that might happen. The walking school bus scenario, where the parent or parents accompany the child or children to school, really solves both those issues, because I can make sure the child gets to school, bicycles or walks on a safe route, and isn't bothered by any other students or anybody else along the way. And I fully hope that other parents feel like I do and will join me so that we can work out a schedule so that 2 or more of us can either walk or bicycle with the students every day. But one single parent doesn't have to do it both directions 5 days a week.
California, sometimes thought of as a progressive state. What's coming up here? What's the legislature looking at that might benefit bicycling or walking?
Thank you. We have a terrific bill in the legislature right now. It's going to establish minimum standards for state buildings for those employees and visitors who wish to bicycle as a form of transportation. Right now, a state building might have nothing for a bicyclist, It may have a dedicated locker, showers, a bicycle locker facility, and everything in between. I'm fortunate in that right now I work at a building with a locker for my clothing, a large room for our bicycles indoors, as well as a shower. But I can tell you I've worked at 4 buildings in 12 years, working for the state of California, and the other 3 had little to zero provisions for bicyclists. And for those people that want to walk and might work up a sweat, there was nothing for them either.
So, future generation coming up, your children at least learning about walking and bicycling, and there are going to be 50 million of those people here in California. Are we going to make it? Is the state going to have a new generation coming up that'll look at those alternatives to just filling the state with more automobiles?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I've lived in California nearly continuously for 38 years. Almost all of it's been in Sacramento. And I've seen the evolution from a road built just for cars to roads built with maybe some afterthoughts for a bicyclist or a pedestrian, to currently a sea change where in some cases communities are building features for pedestrians and bicyclists up front. In addition, there's a federal program called Safe Routes to School, and that is making a terrific impact, primarily addressing the concerns of parents, the concerns of safety, whether it's real or perceived, it doesn't matter, it's there. And for that reason, they choose to drive their students, their children, to school. More and more people are returning to the days when children would walk or bicycle to school. In addition, there's a much higher awareness of the impact that individuals have, both for the better or for the worse. And more people are choosing to have a positive impact.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.